The trial of the century began in November. For the next 4 months, it would lead the front page of local newspapers every day. Alameda County District Attorney, J. Frank Coakley, held no punches in his opening statement. He had no witnesses who could definitively place Abbott with Stephanie, and despite the cache of items found in Abbott's possession, there was no direct physical evidence. Most, like Stephanie's father, thought a conviction unlikely. Prosecution and defense both hinged on one thing: timeline. And they would each spend weeks trying to establish their version of it. The prosecution's first witnesses attempted to track Abbott's movements that day in Berkeley. One witness said he saw Abbott in Pring's Dutch Girl Donuts on Telegraph right by Willard Middle School, at 3 p.m., when Abbott claimed he was halfway to Trinity County. Another witness said they saw a car like Abbott's run a red light at College and Ashby, leading up to the Claremont Hotel, at 3:30 p.m. 5 witnesses gave similar stories about a girl screaming for help in the back of a car. All thought Abbott likely the driver, but none could be certain. The prosecution concluded that Abbott kidnapped, raped and killed Stephanie somewhere in the Contra Costa Hills before driving on to Trinity County to bury her body. They had no proof of this, but they did call a few crucial witnesses. 1. The innkeeper at the Wildwood Bar where Abbott swore he'd had a drink the night of Stephanie's murder, firmly denied that narrative. The innkeeper testified Abbott never came in that night. Another Wildwood local said he visited Abbott's cabin the day after Stephanie's disappearance. Abbott seemed to be behaving strangely, he said, and contrary to the custom the two had built up during previous visits, said Abbott did not invite him inside the cabin. The third witness was the Abbott's babysitter. When asked to recall the night of Stephanie's disappearance, she remembered Abbott made a call from the cabin. He told the rest of the family not to join him that weekend. The weather was no good. The trial headed into its second month. In early December, a pathologist testified. Exhibits were passed around to the jurors. One was a box with a chunk of red clay from her gravesite, imprinted with the girl's skirt. Abbott's defense focused primarily on his physique. He was, his lawyers argued, much too frail to have committed the crime. It would require a man of some strength to kill a 14-year-old girl. Then, there was the gravesite, located up a hillside. There was no way Abbott could have lifted her there, they said. He weighed 134 pounds and the girl was 105. On December 6, the courtroom was witness to an unusual display. In order to prove Abbott was physically handicapped, his lawyer told him to take off his shirt. Reporters noted the move was carefully orchestrated. Abbott didn't wear an undershirt that day, so when he unbuttoned his shirt, he was bare-chested. He paced over to the jury box, showing them the scars from a surgery that removed parts of his ribs to ease his tuberculosis. Livermore Veterans Hospital Dr. Elmer Shabbat, who had treated Abbott for years, said Abbott was in no way currently crippled. Right before Christmas, Abbott's lawyers made a terrible mistake: they put him on the stand. All went well at first. He gave a detailed description of his whereabouts on April 28 and explained how he'd never once crossed paths with Stephanie Bryan. Then, the cross-examination began. Coakley grilled him for 3 days. Of his 13.5 hours on the stand, 11 were with Coakley. Abbott would go long stretches, sometimes up to 15 questions in a row, answering with, "Either I don't know or I don't remember." Coakley also got Abbott to admit a major part of his alibi timeline was a lie. Although Abbott repeatedly said he'd been in Sacramento around the time of Stephanie's disappearance, he said on the stand that wasn't true. He hadn't been to Sacramento that day at all. Abbott was stunned and frightened. He hunched lower and lower in his chair until he seemed to be resting on his neck. Abbott's attorney argued, the real killer was possibly Otto Desmond, George's friend who had been in the house the night they discovered Stephanie's purse in the basement. The jury sequestered for 7 days. On January 25 they signaled they'd come to a verdict. When the first guilty count was read, Abbott's mother Elsie screamed and ran from the courtroom. In the chaos, many didn't hear the second guilty verdict. But it didn't matter, both the first-degree murder and kidnapping charges carried the death penalty. Mary Bryan had nothing to say about the verdict. All she wanted to know was when she could collect her daughter's body from the mortuary, where it had been kept until completion of the trial. On the morning March 15, 1957, the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals denied Abbott's day of execution. His lawyer, George T. Davis, made a frantic phone call to Governor Goodwin Knight, who was on board the USS Hancock. As Abbott's 10 a.m. execution time approached, Knight agreed to a 1-hour stay. At 9:46 a.m., 2 briefs were filed with the California Supreme Court. At 10:42, word came back, they'd been denied. Davis rushed to the phone to call Knight again. At San Quentin, Burton Abbott was being led into the gas chamber. He was strapped into a chair and smiled softly at the guard who asked if he was comfortable. At 11:18 a.m., cyanide pellets were dropped into sulfuric acid and toxic gas began filling the room. 2 minutes later, a phone down the corridor rang. The warden answered. It was the governor. Was it too late to grant another stay, he asked. Yes, replied the warden. It was over. In 1961, the San Quentin chief psychiatrist recalled his final conversation with Abbott. He asked Abbott, "Burton, you need to confess to this crime and ask the governor for clemency." Abbott replied, "Doc, I can't admit it. Think of what it would do to my mother." If Stephanie were alive today, she'd be 82 years old. Instead, she is 14 forever, permanently sweet, reticent and shy. "We are already planning our summer trip," read her unfinished letter to a friend found in Abbott's basement. Stephanie also loved birds. The day she died, she stopped at a pet shop to buy a book, Everything About Parakeets, for 25 cents. It was an odd thing she had in common with the man who took her life.